guys, just waiting for a couple of minutes for Rick to sort of tune in. Hey, hi, Rick. Welcome to have you. Good to have you here.
Hi, Kishore. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Rick, it's a pleasure to have you. Obviously, you guys crossed $1 billion in ARR in a short span of 9 years, right? Something that everybody aspires to be. And I'm just waiting for you guys to IPO at some point of time and see what the market cap looks like at that time. But incredible journey from your end and the team's end. Really excited to have you here. I'll just do a quick introduction so that folks know who you are. Obviously, it's a well-known company, but just for folks who are joining from different places, I can also see a lot of folks who worked with Rick. It looks like, I think, Michael, it looks like you worked with Rick before. Great to have you here. But Rick has been part of the journey for the last 6 years. He joined the company at the probably 10 million ARR, if I'm right, Rick? Right?
Maybe just to say it over that, yeah.
Yeah, and then the company has just crossed $1 billion ARR. So, at least only a few CMOs tend to experience that sort of a journey from being at the very early stage till like an IPO stage. So really good to have you here, Rick. If you're okay, I'm going to shoot you right directly with questions, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, sure. It's been a fun ride and happy to, talk with you about it. Yeah, let's dive in.
Awesome, Rick. Rick, one thing to be honest, I underestimated a lot when I started the business is the importance of company narrative. Right? How important is it to have a good narrative that makes sense to the market? And I think you have sort of worked with companies where you actually created the narrative with the founding team of sorts, right? Would love to understand how should an early stage company or even a growth stage company think about creating a narrative, right? How should it work with the leadership team? What does it take to build a good narrative that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is so important to get the story right, your company story and your messages correct. It affects, the effectiveness of everything else you do, whether it's running a conference or digital advertising or your own website or the deck you provide your sales team. The effectiveness of all those things boils back to like, how strong is the story? How good is it? How well does it resonate? And so I think it's important that before you run and execute all those things, you actually really get that right. In fact, when I joined 6 years ago, that was most of what I spent my time on the first quarter. I was at Databricks. It was like, we have to figure out the story. And it's absolutely essential and important to get the founders involved, heavily involved and invested, and other executives at the company. I mean, they're the ones who really had the vision they understood the market in the first place. They had the vision for where the product's going. They drove the strategy. Like, it's absolutely important to get them to spend their brain cycles on it. And I would say it's really important also to test the messages in the market a little bit with both friendlies, customers, but also prospects, people who haven't heard of you or selected your product yet. But it's also really important to make sure you stay true to your long-term strategy as well. We often, toss around the famous Henry Ford quote about like, if you only just listen to like what people wanted, they would have asked for faster horses, And so, we try to make sure we hear what customers are saying and prospects and what resonates and what doesn't. But also make sure that what we go to market with matches our strategy and our long-term vision. So
Rick, and then how do you think the narrative changes as the company grows? Because I'm trying to figure out, there is obviously this long-term vision, right? But if you say the long-term vision too quickly, the market won't understand that quickly. So how do you keep balancing the short-term goals with the long-term narrative of sorts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you do have to bring people on a journey sometimes if it's a longer-term vision. Although I would say that whenever we've faced tough decisions at Databricks and it's a short-term versus a long-term trade-off, it's almost always for the better when we make the long-term, the decision that's best in the long-term. It's almost always works out better for us rather than short-term decisions. I think with messaging, it does evolve over a longer journey, but really a mistake that I think is easy to make and that all of us have made at times is actually to change the message too frequently. If you change your narrative too frequently, it doesn't land. I mean, to land something in the market, it takes many, many months, quarters, years, often, and repetition to really make it stick. you have to stay pretty true to it. That doesn't mean never ever tweak it or evolve it or change it. Markets change, your product changes, market conditions change like they have over the last year or two. But really, you got to try to have what I believe something that's really important is message stamina. You do have to, once you have that narrative and you put all the time and effort into developing it with the founders and testing it and deciding on it, you have to stick with it and really hammer it into the market consistently over a sustained period of time. And you have to do it consistently so you can have like different channels having different messages or whatever. So I believe strongly in like message stamina and message consistency.
And on the whole process of developing a narrative, right? What is it like? Is it like a 3-month process with, like external consultants coming in and putting in, like, how does the whole sort of journey work a little bit?
Yeah, it is about a 3-month process. I mean, you can try to do it slightly quicker, but really if you do it like dramatically quicker, you're probably shortchanging the process because then you're not making time to test it with prospects or customers or really debate it or look at different pros and cons or you're skipping the brainstorming stage. Or I think it is about a quarter-long process to do it properly. And you can use external. We've in fact had good success with we use a company called Zoom Marketing in Palo Alto that has helped us facilitate the focus groups we've had. And, even like, again, going back to my first quarter at Databricks, I can remember going to some focus groups in New York and, my CEO wanted to jump through the glass, it was the two-way glass. And it'd say, I got to explain data engineering to this guy. But yeah, it's really great to just get raw opinions from prospects and customers. And it's great to have someone marshal the process. But ultimately, you do need to make sure the founders and key execs inside the company are the ones spending a lot of time and effort on it and helping make the final decision.
And how do you guys roll it out to the entire company? Was it like a sales deck, website, all hands, say, here is what we're going to talk about. Every campaign should reflect this value props. Is that how the typical...
Yeah, exactly. Well, really kind of all of the above, because I'm such a believer in message consistency. I don't think you can kind of do it halfway where it's like, oh, the website has this message, but the pitch deck has something different. So we made sure we were all ready to go with like everything. And in our case, we actually did it around our conference when we first changed our, we first changed our messages a few years back. We've evolved them and tweaked them a little bit over time. Although they haven't dramatically changed. For example, we've been talking about the concept of unified data and analytics and AI for years. And then the only thing that changed was over the last 3 years, we've referred to it as the data lakehouse. It's a simpler term that like everyone understands, but the concepts really haven't changed. And the story around simplification, unification, openness, we've stayed true to those. I think it's important to have that consistency through all your channels when you launch.
Got it. And then one thing I've always wondered is that you do all this work and then you come with a good narrative and then you get into the market. How do you sort of bring the market along with you on the journey that, hey, here is what we believe the market is going to look like the 5 years. You should actually like come with us on this journey. And that's a very tough sort of process, I'm assuming. It's not like an overnight, like a sort of a massage that happens, right?
It's definitely not overnight. Yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of doing. And I would say there's kind of two key phases to it. The first one is when you're introducing the concept, especially if you're trying to do category creation, which is not necessarily essential for success. I think there's actually some really good examples of successful software companies that haven't created a category. But if you are trying to do category creation, it's even more important you do the following, which is first you have to condition the market to recognize and acknowledge like the pain. And then also go from that to like, there's a better way to solve this. And of course, that better way to solve it is usually uniquely married to your product or solution. But recognizing that pain is the first step. And by the way, like for us, I would say that was both easy and hard. And what I mean by that is it was easy because in our case, the pain was real. People have like data in lots of different places. They didn't have one place like a data lakehouse where you can store your structured and unstructured data, or one place where you can do all your analytics, BI, and machine learning. So it was kind of a mess. So the pain was real, but it was still hard to get people to acknowledge the pain because there's a lot of emotional and professional attachment to this 40-year-old technology of data warehousing, right? So, and so you have to be aware of that and kind of bring people on the journey. But ultimately, if the pain is real and you can get people to recognize it and recognize there's a better way to solve it, that's phase one. I think phase two, where it really takes off, is when you get customers and partners to just tell the story for you. So phase one is getting enough people to believe in it and try it and do it. And then once they realize there's there, and this really is a better way, once customers start telling the story for you, like we've had customers talking about data lakehouse for years now, and partners, and that really is when the category takes off.
Right. Rick, on that, this is a very important point, because I feel like it's always good to have other folks say more about the category than you sort of, shouting on the rooftop about it. How do you enable that? Is it primarily through events that you ask your customers that, hey, I want you to speak about the concept of lakehouse? Is that primarily through events, or what's your typical? Yeah.
I would say through a variety of channels. Certainly, we do leverage at events, whether it's a conference, our conference, partner conference, field events, but virtual events, webinars, also through blogs. We've done press announcements. We've created videos with customers talking about how they uniquely solve something. We did a fun one with like La Liga, for example, the soccer league. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways through different channels you can convey it. The importance is to have the customer acknowledge that they did have the pain, that is the pain you said you were solving with this new category of product or solution, and that this really did help them solve it, and it paid off in the following specific ways. But yeah, once customers start telling the story for you, that's when it really sticks and takes off.
Right. And in phase one, when you spoke about the conditioning of the market, right, were you guys primarily focused on these early adopters, tech companies, to actually start believing in your vision? Is that how the natural progression happened before the concept became a lot more mainstream?
It's funny. I would say not really. I would say the digital native tech companies were heavy early adopters of the open source products we invented that underpin our lakehouse. But in some ways, it's actually the larger enterprises that had, and this may vary for product and depending on what the pain is. But in our case, the pain was actually felt more severely at large enterprises, even in the early going, because they had lots of different systems to store and manage their data. And it was hard to have one source of the truth. It was hard to do all their analytics in one place. They're double paying and duplicating and moving data all over the place, even more than some tech companies who maybe had it because they've only been around 6 years or what have you. So actually, the enterprises really felt the pain the most. So that was very early on, like right away, a perfect fit for the lakehouse.
Correct. That's a very interesting thing, because typically I will say, at least most companies go through this phase of going to SMBs first, getting the early adopters, then going to the enterprise after that, because it's a very long journey to sort of get there. Any lessons that you can share of how did you guys actually get into enterprise in the first place before sort of going into SMB market and sort of going up market?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it depends on your audience and, again, like the pain you're solving. And so if you think about it, for example, our audience in the early going, one of our core audiences was data scientists. And, if it's a smaller, earlier stage company, they might have a data scientist or a couple of data scientists, but like the companies that have lots of data scientists are like big pharmaceuticals, right? Or big credit card companies, right? Or those kind of things. So it depends. It's going to be different for your different audiences and different products. And then again, it's like, what is the pain? Is the pain like you're starting with a blank slate? Then it might be better for newer companies, right? But in this case, like our audience there were lots of them at these larger companies, lots of data scientists and data engineers at these larger companies. And the pain was they had data, lots of data all over the place in pre-existing systems, right? So it'll vary, I think, a little bit, but it goes back to just making sure you understand your audience and the pain and the problem you're trying to solve.
Got it. And the early channels that work for you guys, is it through the open source motion, like product-led, outbound? Is it a combination of things that actually helped you get in front of these enterprises in the first place? How? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say we used a lot of digital channels and kind of heavy lifting demand generation, and then fairly early on started ramping up our field programs. We had a lot of success with partner marketing too. You know, we've always collaborated really closely with the cloud vendors, for example, as well as ISVs, and now more recently big system integrators. But I would say it's been kind of a mix, a combination, but certainly leveraging the digital channels, not just the open source community though. I don't think we only relied on that. We looked at who's the audience we're trying to reach and how do we most effectively reach them.
Like there's one question from Sylvia which I actually like. So how do you stay on track and keep from being reactionary to what others are doing, right? Like you spoke about the stamina of messaging, right? How do you sort of stay away from the market noise and sort of?
Yeah, I can't tell if that's a messaging question or a focus question, but I'll kind of try to answer it both ways, I guess. It's with messaging, you just have to have the discipline to really stay true to, if you did a quarter's worth of homework, as we talked about earlier, it does take 3 months to get your messaging and positioning right. Then you should have some degree of confidence that this is right, and at least stick with it and try it for a while, and then decide either, 3 quarters, 4 quarters in that it's not working, or it just needs a little tweaking, or it's working really great and you just need to stick with it and keep hammering it. In terms of if it's more of a broader question, I would say it's like ruthless prioritization and time management, and that does come into play, especially in earlier stage, like fast growing companies, because there's so much you could do and so much coming at you, and maybe it's more important that you do like 3 things well. For example, it's more important that you get the messaging right, and that you pick a few channels to drive it through, and that you hire the right team, and that's it. And then maybe everything else has to like fall on the floor while you focus on getting those 3 things right. Yeah. So I call it ruthless prioritization.
Right. I think there's one more question on a similar line from Ankur. You mentioned it's almost always worth investing in the long term. How do you secure buy-in from your leadership team in the early stages of the journey when results are almost always less efficient? First, do you agree with that?
I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some assumptions built into the question. I guess I do think it's important to get some quick wins. I mean, obviously you can't say to your CEO like this is gonna result in pipeline in 2 years. Don't worry, like that's not gonna work at a fast growing startup. So you have to produce results in the immediate term. I just mean more strategically, directionally. If it's like, hey, there's 2 different ways we could be producing this pipeline. We could go with this message, which will resonate, but won't really last more than 6 months. Or we could go down this path. I would pick the path that has a longer life cycle to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Rick, the other thing that I want to sort of touch upon is hiring, right? Obviously, folks are not hiring a lot these days, but still, I think when you sort of grow a company from 10 million to $1 billion in 6 years, you have to have people that needs to support all these growth. How do you guys decide to look at what qualities I should look for? Like, what is the process that you guys ran to actually hire like high quality folks into the marketing team across all functions, right? Like not just like core, across all functions.
Yeah, it's a great question because we've had to grow from about I think about 6 of us in 2017 to a couple hundred, and I would say we did it as a team. Like I had a lot of help from the leaders, and that's where I'll probably start. Is it is kind of tricky when you're at a fast growing startup that's growing either high double digits or triple digits even every year, and so you want people who can come in and do the work and roll up their sleeves, people who are like builder mentality, low ego, but also are the people you're going to need in 2 years to lead and run and manage the team and have a long-term org vision, and they understand org structure. They're good at hiring, they manage performance, all those things. So we kind of have this profile we call scrappy leader. And that's worked really well for us. Like I would say since the day I started at Databricks, we've hired scrappy leaders, and we kind of continue to do it. Of course, now we're a little bigger, about 5,000 employees. And so we also hire people who've also seen and experienced some scale. But I think this scrappy leader idea of like someone who will roll up their sleeves, do the work, player coach, low ego, builder mentality, but they know how to hire well. They have an org vision. They know how to ruthlessly prioritize. So they're also like have some leadership experience and capacity. That's an interesting combination that has worked really, really well for us. And we wouldn't have built the team we have today, which I think is a great team, without all these other leaders who've been instrumental in doing that.
And how do you look for those scrappy leader sort of persona in these candidates?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, first of all, as my CEO always likes to say, it's actually hard to do both hiring fast and have a really high bar and a lot of rigor around hiring, which we do. And because those things are kind of at odds with each other, right? So it's hard to do both. So the only way around it and the only way through it really is like, you have to spend a lot of time on it. So again, it speaks to the scrappy leader thing I mentioned is all my leaders have like LinkedIn recruiter licenses themselves. We have a great recruiter as well that we work with, but like they also have to do their own sourcing and do their own getting there with the recruiter and like help and like manage and do outreach and actually spend a lot of time just meeting people, networking. Certainly when you're hiring leaders, you got to spend a lot of time with that person, checking referrals, back channels, what have you, like really doing your homework. I think it's just so important to make sure you're making good hires. So there's no other way around it other than to just like invest a lot of time in it. So that's one of those places where I have ruthlessly prioritized, and it varies with time, but there's been times where like, if you're hiring multiple leaders, like you got to spend like half your time on it and at the expense of other things. Otherwise you won't get amazing people that help you grow the company over the next 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, Rick, but I'll tell you this thing. I've always found hiring very hard. Like it's very hard for me to understand if somebody is a scrappy leader from a 30-minute interview discussion, right? It's such a very, at least, I've found it very hard, but at least good that you guys have cracked that code to figure out what's working.
Well, no, I do think interviews are certainly imperfect. That's for sure. I think you look at the body of evidence. I'm a big believer in what has someone actually done. Now, it doesn't mean someone can't do something they haven't done before, but that is one data point that's worth looking at. Is like, can you see how what they've done before will translate at least into what you need them to go do? That's like number one. Number two is you give them an exercise, right? For us, like every person, every person we hired the first 4 years I was here, and now I think it's more the senior levels, but had to present. I had to present when I got the job, and you have to present as part of a candidacy of like, tell us about your experiences in XYZ, how you build teams, how you build functions, how you build from nothing, what's your vision for this role, those kinds of things. And then also, doing your homework on the person, like talking to others who've worked with them, doing back channel checks, etc. And so what's the person's reputation from others who've worked with that person?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, there's one question that came up from the previous discussion that I want to take. I think it's a fairly important discussion. What happens when you reach phase 2, when customers start singing your praise? How do you adjust your long-term strategy? Do you even have to adjust your long-term strategy at that point of time? But right,
I think the only adjustment there that's significant is like, you really make sure you provide the platform for the customers, because there's nothing better than that, having the customers tell the story, right? So it's are you providing a good platform for them to do so? Like, are they able to do it in visible ways, either depending on what's most important to you, either on a main stage at your conference, or maybe it's more important in your particular situation for them to be talking to an analyst who you need the analyst, you need Gartner to give you a better rating or something, or using them in peer-to-peers, or but I would say making sure you're providing a platform to leverage the heck out of that, because there's nothing better than that.
Awesome. Like, on the follow-up to the hiring question, one thing that I wanted to understand was the international expansion, right? So when you guys decided to go, like, what made that decision to happen? Hey, we should go international at a leadership level. And B, how's the team set up right now? Is it a core sort of function in US looking after the international teams, or is there like regionally centralized teams across different geographies of sorts?
Yeah, let's see. I would say in terms of how we decide to go into these different markets, we look for, is the market ready? Does the market have like the same, if we go into this country, does it have the same characteristics where we've seen a lot of success and we know the motion? And does it make sense? Do we think we can reap the benefits of it fairly quickly versus just doubling down the markets we're in? That's kind of how we look at it. And we've gotten better at this over time. I'll admit, like kind of in the early going, we would sometimes not put as much rigor into those decisions as we do now. And we've learned through putting more rigor into it that you kind of have to go with multiple functions. Like you can't shortchange it by just dropping like a sales rep in a country or something. You know, if you start putting salespeople, one lesson I learned is like, you've got to put like a regional marketer in place. Otherwise you're not going to succeed. At the same time as the sales, you have to synchronize it. There can't be much delta there. If you try to put especially multiple salespeople and a sales leader in a country and say, oh, we'll staff marketing like a year from now, it's not going to work nobody's going to end up in a good situation there. You know, there's going to be a lot of pressure on marketing. How come they're not getting what they need? And sales might not be successful because the first thing the salespeople are going to want to know is, okay, so what do we have in the way of pipeline? Oh, there's not any pipeline. Well, what are the activities going on? What's going to drive awareness? What's going to create pipeline? Oh, there's nobody to support me here. You know, so like you kind of have to really synchronize those things. I'm sorry. I feel like I forgot the second part of your question though now.
No, the question, I think you sort of answered a little bit. I was wondering if a central team in US can manage all these regional activities sort of locally, right? But it doesn't.
Yeah, I think they can for a while. I mean, I think it depends on the function. The way we've kind of done it is like our digital marketing and to give you some examples, our digital marketing and web teams have been very centralized. And only now at this size and scale is it starting to change and we're putting people in the regions. You know, and then the regional marketing goes more broadly, but we kit things up. We kit up campaigns at global and push them out. You know, I'd say like, there was a point probably halfway through my journey here. So call it when you're in, you know, a few hundred millions in revenue. Then you do need like things like PR and things in the regions. But we've also had functions where some functions we put them in the regions and had them hardline into headquarters and dotted line into the regions. And our regional leaders actually love that. Like they actually were totally supportive and have been great like dotted line leaders, and that's worked out really well for us.
Got it. Rick, and then what's the profile of the first couple of regional marketers that you hire in your region for you guys? Is it primarily someone who's very generalist, who can do events, field marketing programs at the region, or what's the profile you typically look for when you?
Yeah, it is a little bit. You're talking about individuals, as opposed to like for example, our first hire in MIA was a scrappy leader who ran all the MIA. But yeah, in terms of like when we launch a new country, like when we did in Korea or Brazil, it is kind of someone who's strong on events, but also versatile. Versatility is pretty important because in the end, what they end up doing is not only running like webinars and giving guidance to our digital team on where to invest, but they get involved in customer references and stories and partners and PR. And so I do think where we've had success with some really strong regional marketers their versatility is just critical in these roles. And also sales centricity, also ability to work really well with sales. Cause like you're just going to be part of a pod in a way. Exactly. Like you're going to put like a small pod in, let's say, Korea and launch there. And that person has to be versatile and work really well with sales and be adaptable.
Got it. Rick, this question you can choose not to answer, but I think it's an interesting question. Did you miss performance expectations when you're launching into any particular international market? Which criteria did you evaluate to dial down investment or pull out of market entirely? Because the reason is that it's very hard to have targets set when you're entering a market, right? Because it's just so tough. So I think that's like the question.
Yeah, I'll say, I don't know if I want to name the market, but I'll say there were a couple places earlier on where we didn't do what I just described, which is put a cross-functional pod in the country. And we also didn't do like probably thorough enough analysis on like whether that country was the right place to go next on all the different, because it's always like opportunity cost too, right? You're looking at like, you could look at a country in isolation and say, oh, should we go or not go? but that's not a good way to make a decision, right? You have to broaden the options and look at all the different options. And the opportunity cost is either you could be going into a different country, or you could just be doubling down on a country that you're is going well for you, but you're still not anywhere near penetrated. Could be the US even, or it could be Canada, or, you know. And so I would say with, there were 1 or 2 places where we probably went earlier than we should have. They probably shouldn't have been as high on the priority list, and we didn't go the full pod. And as a result, we saw that phenomenon I mentioned earlier, where, you know, you put salespeople in, but they don't have any support, and they're like, where's the awareness? Where's the pipeline coming from? And but that was in very early days, and we kind of learned some lessons from that, I'd say.
Makes sense, right? Like, on events, like, since obviously, you know, you guys do a lot of events, how are you thinking about events this year? You know, obviously the last 2 years were like a different period of sorts. Now we're reaching some steady state. You know, hopefully the recession gets through. But how are you thinking about events? Like, you know, digital, in person, hybrid, combination of all these stuff. Like, what's your plan?
Yeah, I would say a combination of all, because what we've seen is when we do hold in-person events, people are coming back. Like, people want them, they're hungry, they do come back. And so we're getting good numbers and good engagement. People are staying like the whole event into the evening, networking events. We've seen this in Europe and Sydney and in the US. And so we actually seeing in-person events pop back, and the level of engagement is obviously the deepest when you can do that. However, we're also seeing just a lot of virtual engagement too, probably more than pre-pandemic, virtual engagement, whereby even if people register and only come to like a portion of your event or what have you, that sometimes does turn into pipeline, though. There's really still an indication of interest. So we're actually kind of doing a balance, I would say. And so it's some events are hybrid, and we're doing a fair amount of in-person only, and also virtual only as well.
Got it. Like, so one thing I keep hearing is that people are at least cutting down on trade show budgets, because it's usually very expensive. You know, they're shifting their mind to only a few events. Have you sort of decided to sort of cut down on trade shows a little bit this year, or are you keeping it the same as last year in general?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are being pretty careful about trade shows. I'm not sure if technically we're actually going down year over year, but like, we are scrutinizing them as much or as ever, if not more so. I think we will do some of them, but you know, obviously your own owned events are going to drive the best ROI, and especially when you get to a certain size. I mean, if you're very early, it may be harder for you to like fill a room or what have you, right? And in those cases, you got to get creative and do events with partners and other things, and find ways to, or sponsor, or work with a third party who can help you fill the room. But you know, once you get to a certain size, your own events are going to drive the most ROI. So we drive like industry symposiums and workshops and things like that drive a lot of ROI. But you know, it still makes sense to go to some third-party conferences to you know, engage in a new community. If it's a new partnership, let's say, partner conferences are I kind of look at through a slightly different lens than just industry conferences. So it's a good way to reach new audiences, things like that. But the ROI is generally not going to be as good, so you do have to pick and choose carefully. Yeah, so I would say we're definitely not going like hog wild on trade shows.
Got it. Right. Like, there's one question from Chaitra. Obviously, this has become a slightly buzz thing now. Like, you know, sort of how are you sort of leveraging AI in your marketing campaigns to scale programs easily, or is it still early phases?
Yeah, we're kind of early stages. We actually have of doing some of this ourselves. In fact, we have a new analytics leader who's really versed on Databricks, and we're actually, of course, using our own product to do some of this. And so we're actually just now kind of embarking on that, and we'll probably actually have a pretty good story to tell in about 6 months around how to do some of that on Databricks, actually.
Oh, interesting. How do you guys
there are other companies who do that, like Atlassian, for example, uses Databricks for predictive lead scoring and things like that, and next likely purchase and things like that.
I see. Oh, that way. Got it. I think there's one last question, Rick, from my end, and then I'll take some questions if you have time.
Yeah.
One thing that I think everybody is noticing is that, like, it looks like these paid campaigns are getting very expensive, right? The third-party cookies are going away in 2024, so it's going to be a lot more harder to depend on third-party audience and stuff. And there is companies like HubSpot who are acquiring these media companies, right, to actually sort of put out like really good content in multiple formats, right? Podcasts, newsletters, emails, events, and stuff. Any sort of thoughts from your end in terms of how are you thinking about that, sort of to market like a media company of SaaS? Like, and do you think it's even needed right now? What's your sort of overall philosophy there?
Well, I do think the most efficient growth is always going to come from being able to build your own database, right? And getting people to opt into your database, and then you have to earn the right not only to get them but to keep them in your database, right, as opted in. And the way you earn that right is, I think, through educating folks and having educational content and actually providing value in what you send them. And so there is a blurry line there between what's marketing and what's education, right? And so we've always tried to have an educational tone, whether it's to our technical audiences or even now to like CIOs and CDOs, more, which we're doing more of now, is like, but it's still educational tone in terms of like your data strategy and how do you fit in, generative AI into your data, into your strategy, right, and things like that. And so if you take an educational tone, I think one way to do that is the sort of media site. That can be a viable way to do it. I don't think that's the only way to do it, though. Right. I think you can have like a any company website can still provide educational content that people find tremendous value in, right?
That makes sense. Awesome, Rick. Rick, I know you have to run to a call with your CEO, so I'm not going to take too much of your time, but I definitely appreciate your time today. I know you're usually busy, so it's been an incredible session to have you sort of share some knowledge with the folks in the marketing community. I hope you do more of these soon.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, Kishore. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. See you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.